The deputy had one hand resting on his holster when he looked me dead in the eye and said, "Sir, the homeowner claims you've been trespassing and threatening her family." I remember just standing there in wet boots holding a fishing pole, staring past him at the woman across the lake waving from a second-floor balcony like she'd just won a game show. What almost sent me over the edge wasn't the accusation. It was the fact that she was standing on property my grandfather built with his bare hands in 1971. And the craziest part? That woman had absolutely no idea the luxury house she was renting technically belonged to me. My name's Eli Mercer, and 3 years ago I moved back to Blackwater Cove, Wisconsin after 22 years hauling freight across the Midwest and one divorce that cleaned me out so bad I was eating canned soup for dinner out of pride more than poverty. My grandfather left me this old cedar cabin tucked along the lake. Nothing fancy. Peeling green paint, crooked dock, windows that rattled during storms. But to me it smelled like peace. Pine needles, wet wood, lake water at sunrise. Felt like breathing again after years of asphalt and diesel fumes. Blackwater Cove wasn't the kind of place where people locked doors. Folks waved from fishing boats, left coolers outside during fish fries, and argued mostly about football or whose dog got into whose bait bucket. Then Veronica Hale showed up. You ever meet somebody so polished they almost don't look real? That was Veronica. Platinum blonde hair that never moved in the wind, white sweaters even in July, sunglasses bigger than common sense. She rolled into town with a black Range Rover and rented the biggest house on the lake. This giant glass and stone monstrosity locals called the aquarium, because at night the whole place glowed like a shopping mall dropped into the woods. First week there, she introduced herself to half the shoreline like she was campaigning for governor. Smiled too long, asked too many questions, complimented people while somehow insulting them at the same time. Then came the HOA talk. Problem was, Blackwater Cove didn't have an HOA. Never had. Nobody wanted one. But Veronica talked about community standards the way televangelists talk about salvation. One morning I was sitting on my dock with coffee and a tackle box fixing an old reel my grandfather used before I was born when I heard that voice float across the water. Eli 3. Neighbor. I looked up and there she was cruising toward me in this ridiculous white pontoon boat that probably cost more than my truck. She smiled like we were old friends, even though every instinct in my body already disliked her. We need to discuss your property appearance. I laughed because honestly I thought she was joking. She wasn't. She stepped onto my dock holding a clipboard. A clipboard. On a fishing dock. Several residents have concerns about the visual presentation of your shoreline, she said. All calm and rehearsed. The rusted boat trailer, the fishing equipment, the outdated dock structure. I stared at her for a second waiting for the punchline. Ma'am, I finally said, that rusted trailer belonged to my grandfather. That dock's been here longer than you've been alive. Her smile tightened just a little. Well, communities evolve. This ain't a community, I said. It's a lake. That's when I saw it happen. That little crack in the mask. Tiny, but real. Her eyes went cold. You know, she said softly. People who resist progress usually end up isolated. I actually laughed at that. Not because it was funny, because it sounded insane. Like who talks like that over fishing poles and dockboards? She turned around without another word, stepped back onto her boat, and throttled the engine hard enough to rock my dock. Coffee splashed across my jeans while gasoline fumes drifted through the pine air. I watched her disappear across the water toward that giant glowing house and got this ugly feeling in my stomach I hadn't felt since my divorce lawyers started smiling during meetings. 3 days later, an envelope appeared taped to my front door. Official notice. Property violation. Unauthorized shoreline aesthetics. $500 fine. Threat of legal action. Signed by something called the Blackwater Cove Residential Preservation Committee. I stood there reading it twice while my coffee went cold in my hand. Then I started laughing so hard I scared a deer out of the trees. But deep down, something about it bothered me. Because crazy people are dangerous when they actually believe they're the hero. And Veronica Hale? She believed it with her whole soul. I should have ignored the letter. Honestly, that's probably what a smarter man would have done. Toss it in the trash, crack open a beer, go fishing, let the rich lake lady scream into the void until she got bored. But there's something about somebody trying to push you around inside your own home that crawls under your skin and stays there. Especially when you've already spent half your life being told where to stand, where to drive, where to sleep, what to obey. I did my time taking orders. I wasn't about to start again because some woman in designer loafers discovered Pinterest landscaping. The next morning I drove into town and headed straight for the county records office, mostly because my grandfather used to say if somebody threatens you with paperwork, beat them with better paperwork. The basement smelled like dust and old coffee, same as every courthouse in America. Behind the desk sat this tiny woman named Carol Benton, who had probably been filing deeds since Abraham Lincoln. She looked at the violation notice over the rim of her glasses and actually snorted. "Oh Lord," she muttered. "Another Veronica complaint." That caught my attention real quick. Another? Carol leaned closer like she was about to share state secrets. "Honey, that woman's been down here near every week trying to figure out how to force people into private covenants. She keeps asking if there's legal pathways to mandatory compliance. There aren't, right?" Carol gave me a look that practically insulted my intelligence. "This is Wisconsin, not North Korea." Turns out the so-called committee listed on my violation notice legally meant absolutely nothing. No HOA charter connected to my deed. No lake authority. No covenant restrictions. Veronica had basically created a fake organization with fancy stationery and enough confidence to fool people who didn't know better. But then Carol pulled up a few more property records, and things got interesting. Very interesting. Several homes around Blackwater Cove had recently transferred into temporary LLC ownership tied to short-term rental businesses, vacation listings, event rentals, weekend party properties, and every single one somehow traced back to Veronica Hale. Suddenly, the whole community standards nonsense started making sense. She wasn't trying to improve the lake. She was trying to control it. Quiet locals didn't fit the luxury image she wanted to sell online. Old fishing cabins didn't attract wealthy tourists looking for exclusive lakefront experiences. My grandfather's crooked dock and my beat-up aluminum fishing boat threatened her fantasy version of Blackwater Cove. And apparently, I wasn't the only target. That night, I posted a simple question in the town Facebook group. Anybody else getting weird HOA notices from Veronica Hale? My phone damn near exploded. Within an hour, I had messages from retirees, widows, young couples, even the owner of the bait shop. One woman said Veronica threatened legal action because her grandchildren left kayaks visible near the shoreline. Another guy got complaints over an American flag mounted too aggressively on his garage. Somebody else said Veronica called animal control over a golden retriever that literally slept 20 hours a day. The stories kept coming, and every single one had the same pattern. Intimidation first, legal threats second, fake authority the entire time. That's how the Dockside group started. Dumb name, I know, but it began as a joke in our group chat and somehow stuck. There were 12 of us at first, then 15, then more. Normal people, quiet people, folks who'd spent years minding their own business until Veronica arrived acting like she owned the shoreline. Janet Miller became the unofficial brains of the operation. Retired school librarian, 63 years old, sweet voice, terrifyingly organized. The woman could build a criminal case using sticky notes and highlighters. She started documenting every complaint, every threat, every fake notice Veronica sent. Bullies hate records, Janet told me one night while organizing screenshots at my kitchen table. Because records don't get intimidated. Meanwhile, Veronica kept escalating. One afternoon, a county zoning officer showed up at my cabin looking exhausted before he even stepped out of the truck. "I gotta inspect a complaint about hazardous dock conditions," he sighed. I walked him down to the shoreline while he measured boards and checked supports. After 15 minutes, he rubbed his forehead and muttered, "Your dock's safer than mine." Before leaving, he hesitated beside his truck. "Off the record," he said quietly. "That woman offered me money last month to interpret codes creatively. That sentence changed everything for me. Up until then, Veronica had just been an annoying control freak. But bribery? Trying to weaponize county employees? That crossed into something uglier. And honestly, something about it started bothering me on a deeper level. Because underneath all the drama, all the Karen jokes, all the fake HOA nonsense, I started seeing desperation. Real desperation. Like somebody trying to hold together a collapsing house with duct tape and threats. A few days later, Janet uncovered something huge. Veronica was behind on multiple loan payments connected to her rental properties. Massive debt, pending lawsuits down in Illinois. Credit problems stretching back years. Suddenly, the luxury clothes and polished attitude looked less like wealth and more like camouflage. Then came the police calls. First one happened at dawn. 2 deputies rolled onto my property while I was cleaning fish at the dock. Veronica had reported an armed, unstable male threatening residents. The younger deputy looked nervous until I calmly showed him the security footage. Me, sitting alone cutting walleye fillets while old country music played from a radio. Sergeant Dunn, the older deputy, watched the footage in silence, then finally sighed. "Mr. Mercer, this woman's becoming a problem. For me or for you?" He gave me a tired little smile. "Both." After that, Veronica started watching me. Not subtly either. I'd look across the lake and see her standing behind those giant aquarium windows with binoculars and a phone in her hand. One night, she even followed Janet home from the grocery store because she thought Janet was collecting evidence. Which, to be fair, she was. But still, that same week somebody removed the drain plug from my fishing boat. I came outside at sunrise and found it half sunk at the dock with water sloshing inside the engine compartment. Oil shimmered across the surface of the lake, while loons cried somewhere out in the fog. My stomach dropped instantly because I knew. Security cameras confirmed it. Grainy footage, hooded guy, pickup truck registered to a handyman Veronica used for her rental properties. That's when the entire thing stopped feeling ridiculous. It stopped being small-town drama and turned into something darker. Sheriff's deputies came out again, this time serious. Property damage over a certain amount becomes felony territory real quick in Wisconsin. Deputy Dunn watched the footage twice before looking at me carefully. "You need to understand something," he said quietly. "She's spiraling." Turns out while Veronica had been busy terrorizing the lake, she was also falling behind on rent payments for that giant glass mansion she loved showing off. 2 months late, then 3. And that's when my lawyer called me with information so insane I genuinely thought he'd mixed up the files. "Eli," Arthur said over the phone, sounding half amused, half stunned, "you should probably sit down before I explain this." I was sitting at the kitchen table staring at unpaid electric bills and eating leftover chili straight out of the pot when Arthur finally dropped the bomb. "The house Veronica's renting," he paused like he still couldn't believe it himself, "belongs to your family trust." I blinked at him. "What?" "Your grandfather created a land trust in the 80s. Tax reasons. Asset protection. The property management company handles the rentals automatically. You own controlling interest now." I just sat there for a second listening to the refrigerator hum while my brain tried catching up. Across the lake sat the woman who'd spent 6 months trying to destroy my life. And technically she'd been mailing rent checks into an account connected to me the entire time. I actually started laughing. Not because it was funny exactly, more because reality had officially become too stupid to process normally. Arthur slid the lease paperwork across the table. "She's violated nearly every clause in here. Unauthorized business activity, harassment complaints, property damage allegations, late rent." He tapped the final page. "Legally, you can evict her tomorrow." That should have felt satisfying. It didn't. Honestly, I just felt tired. Because somewhere along the way this stopped being about fake HOA notices and turned into watching a person completely unravel in public. Still, actions have consequences. And Veronica had left a trail of damage behind her like a tornado wearing expensive perfume. Arthur convinced me to give her one final chance before filing eviction paperwork. "Courts love reasonable people," he said. "And right now she looks increasingly unreasonable without your help." So we scheduled a mediation meeting at the town hall. Word spread through Blackwater Cove faster than a fishing rumor in July. By the time that Thursday rolled around, Half the town had somehow found excuses to drop by town hall. Old men leaned against pickup trucks outside, drinking gas station coffee, like they were tailgating a football game. Inside, Veronica arrived wearing an all-white pantsuit that looked wildly too expensive for northern Wisconsin. Her lawyer walked beside her carrying a leather briefcase and the exhausted expression of a man billing by the hour through personal suffering. She looked confident at first. Then Arthur opened the meeting by sliding the lease agreement across the table. I watched the exact moment realization hit her. It was almost physical, like somebody knocked the air out of her lungs. "No," she whispered, staring at the paperwork. Arthur stayed calm. "Miss Hale, Mr. Mercer is the acting beneficiary of the Blackwater Residential Trust, which owns your current rental property." Her face drained completely white. For the first time since she arrived at the lake, Veronica looked human instead of theatrical. Scared, cornered, embarrassed. Then the anger came flooding back twice as hard. "This is a setup," she snapped, standing so fast her chair scraped backward. "You people have been conspiring against me for months." Janet, sitting quietly near the wall with her giant evidence binder in her lap, finally spoke up. "No, Veronica," she said softly. "We just got tired of being bullied." The room went dead silent. Even Veronica's lawyers stopped moving. Arthur calmly laid out the violations one by one. False police reports, harassment, unlicensed rental activity, property damage investigation, late rent, attempted bribery allegations already under county review. Every sentence pushed Veronica further into panic. Finally, she looked at me directly. "You could have stopped this any time." That hit harder than I expected because part of me knew she was right. Maybe I could have. Maybe somewhere earlier in the story, somebody could have sat her down before everything turned poisonous. But then I remembered Florence crying after getting threatened with lawsuits over bird feeders. Remembered waking up to police lights outside my cabin. Remembered my grandfather's old fishing boat half sunk in black water because somebody decided intimidation mattered more than decency. "You had chances too," I told her quietly. For a second I thought she might actually break down. Instead she laughed, this brittle little laugh that sounded one step away from crying. "You people think you've won?" she muttered. "This town is dying. I was trying to make it valuable." Old man Cooper from the back wall answered before I could. "Lady," he grumbled, "it was valuable before you got here." That one landed like a shotgun blast. 2 weeks later, Veronica Hale left Blackwater Cove in a rented U-Haul, while 3 different county investigations continued circling behind her like sharks. Nobody celebrated exactly. Well, okay, Florence absolutely celebrated. She sat on her porch drinking boxed wine, waving at the moving truck like it was a parade float. But most of us just watched quietly from our docks as the aquarium finally went dark. And honestly, the lake felt different afterward. Quieter, like everybody had been holding their breath for months without realizing it. That fall, the Dockside Group turned into an actual community committee, but not the fake power-hungry kind Veronica wanted. No fines, no threats, just neighbors helping neighbors. We organized shoreline cleanups, repaired old docks for elderly residents, even started a scholarship fund for local kids. Funny thing is, the community Veronica tried to force into existence only became real after she left. Sometimes I still think about her, though. More than I probably should. Because underneath all the arrogance and manipulation was somebody terrified of losing control, terrified of becoming irrelevant, terrified that if she stopped performing success for 5 minutes, the whole illusion would collapse. And maybe that's the part that still sticks with me. Bullies usually aren't born cruel. They become cruel trying desperately not to feel powerless. But that doesn't excuse the damage they cause along the way. These days I drink coffee every morning on the same crooked dock my grandfather built 50 years ago. Loons still call across Blackwater Cove at sunrise. Pine still smells like pine. Peace finally came back. Real peace this time, not the kind somebody sells in a rental listing. But I'll ask you this because people still argue about it online every time somebody retells this story. If you found out the person making your life miserable was secretly renting property connected to your family the whole time, would you have evicted them immediately or tried giving them one last chance the way I did? Let me know down in the comments. And if you've ever dealt with an HOA tyrant, nightmare neighbor, or somebody drunk on fake authority, share your story too. Trust me, you're probably not the only one.